Have you ever had your trust completely shattered by someone you thought you could rely on? Maybe it was a friend, a partner, or someone in a position of authority. Drop your state in the comments and tell me about a time when betrayal changed everything for you. Because today's story is about a woman who discovered that the person she trusted most was selling her vulnerability to the highest bidder. The photos are spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Nadia's hands shake as she stares at them, her own face looking back at her from a dozen different angles, images that should not exist anywhere outside a medical file. The man sitting across from her, dark eyes patient and impossibly calm, is not a doctor. He is something far more dangerous. And somehow, he is the only person who can help her now. 2 weeks earlier, Nadia Reeves had believed she understood the world she lived in. Portland's rain-soaked streets felt familiar beneath her feet as she hurried toward the medical building where she'd worked for the past 3 years. The gray November sky hung low over the city, typical for this time of year, and she clutched her coffee like a lifeline against the morning chill. At 28, she'd built a life she was proud of, modest but honest. Medical assistant by day, nursing student by night. She saved every spare dollar toward the degree that would finally lift her into the career she'd dreamed about since she was 16. Dr. Richard Chin's practice occupied the 3rd floor of a building in the upscale Pearl District, all glass and steel, and the kind of understated wealth that whispered rather than shouted. The waiting room had leather chairs and abstract art on the walls, magazines that were actually current, a water dispenser with cucumber slices floating in it. Their patients were mostly young professionals with excellent insurance, the kind of people who got annual physicals because they actually cared about preventive medicine rather than waiting until something went catastrophically wrong. Nadia had always felt lucky to work there. Dr. Chun was respected, his practice successful, and he treated his staff well. Better than well, actually. He paid above market rate, offered continuing education stipends, never made her feel like she was just another employee. When she'd mentioned wanting to go to nursing school, he'd been supportive, adjusting her schedule to accommodate evening classes. She'd thought of him almost like a mentor, someone who saw her potential and wanted to help her reach it. That morning started like any other. Nadia arrived at 7:30 to prep exam rooms, confirm appointments, review patient files. Monica, the receptionist, was already at the front desk, and Yuki, the other medical assistant, showed up right at 8 when they opened. The first few patients were routine. Blood pressure checks, medication refills, a strep throat culture that came back positive. Dr. Chun moved through appointments with his usual efficient kindness, and Nadia fell into the familiar rhythm of vitals and charting and keeping everything running smoothly. The appointment that changed everything was at 11:15. Jessica Park, 24, coming in for her annual physical. Pretty girl, graphic designer at one of the tech companies downtown, always friendly when she came in. Nadia got her checked in, took her vitals, made small talk about the rain while Jessica changed into a gown. Everything normal. Everything fine. Except when Dr. Chin came in, he had his phone in his hand along with his tablet. That wasn't unusual exactly. Doctors use their phones for all kinds of things now, medical apps and prescription databases, and secure messaging. But something about the way he angled it during the examination made Nadia's stomach clench with an instinct she couldn't immediately name. He was taking photos. Extra photos. More than what would ever be needed for medical documentation. Nadia stood frozen by the counter, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. Maybe there was a new protocol she didn't know about. Maybe the tablet wasn't syncing properly, and he needed backup images. Maybe she was being paranoid, seeing problems where none existed. These are just for our updated records, Dr. Chen said smoothly when Jessica asked about the phone. New digital documentation system. Everything above board, I promise. Jessica accepted the explanation without question. Why wouldn't she? This was her doctor, someone she trusted, someone with excellent credentials and a spotless reputation. Nadia wanted to accept it too, wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. But that clench in her stomach didn't ease, and when the appointment ended and Jessica left, Nadia found herself watching Dr. Chin more carefully than she ever had before. Over the next few days, she noticed the pattern. Not every patient, just certain ones. Young women, attractive, mostly in their 20s and 30s. The phone always appeared during examinations where the patient was in a gown, where they were at their most exposed and vulnerable. The explanations varied slightly, but always sounded professional, always sounded reasonable. Digital documentation, updated imaging requirements, quality assurance protocols. Nadia tried to convince herself she was wrong. Dr. Chun was a respected physician. He'd been nothing but kind to her. She was probably misunderstanding something technical about medical documentation. But her hands shook when she assisted with those appointments now, and she started finding excuses to leave the exam room, to busy herself with other tasks, anything to avoid being complicit in whatever was happening. The decision to stay late came on a Thursday evening. Everyone else had left. Monica first, then Yuki, then the last patient at 6. Dr. Chin usually stayed until 7 or 8, catching up on charting and paperwork in his office. Nadia told him she wanted to study in the break room, use the quiet time to review for an exam. He seemed pleased that she was so dedicated, told her to lock up when she left. She waited until she heard his office door close. Then she waited another 20 minutes, making sure he was settled in. The medical building grew quiet around her, just the hum of ventilation and the distant sound of traffic outside. Her heart hammered so hard she felt it in her throat as she approached Dr. Chin's office computer, the one at the front desk where patient files were accessed. His password was saved in the system, a security violation she'd never thought twice about before. Now she was grateful for it as the screen unlocked, and she opened the file directory. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for, just some proof that her suspicions were unfounded, some reasonable explanation that would let her sleep at night. What she found was worse than anything she'd imagined. A folder labeled Record Secondary, another labeled Patient Imaging Supplemental, both encrypted, both hidden several layers deep in the directory structure. But the encryption was old, basic, and Nadia had taken enough IT courses to know how to bypass it. The password was simple once she tried the obvious, his daughter's name and birth year. The files opened. Hundreds of photos, maybe thousands. Women in exam gowns, women undressed, women in vulnerable positions during medical examinations. All taken without consent, or with consent obtained through lies. The file names were organized by date and patient name, clinical and cold. Nadia recognized some of them immediately. Jessica Park was there. So was Amanda Torres, who'd come in last month for a gynecological exam. So was Priya Desai, who Nadia had chatted with about her upcoming wedding just 2 weeks ago. And so was Nadia herself. Her own face stared back at her from the screen, images from her required annual physical 6 months ago. Photos she'd never consented to. Angles that were invasive and humiliating. Her body documented like evidence or inventory. The violation hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, making the room spin. She'd trusted him. She'd worked beside him for 3 years, admired him, learned from him. And the entire time, he'd been exploiting her and dozens of other women who had no idea these images existed. Nadia's hands moved on autopilot, pulling a USB drive from her bag, copying the entire directory. She had no plan beyond getting this evidence, some vague idea that she'd go to the police, to the medical board, to someone who could stop this. The files transferred slowly, agonizing minutes while she kept glancing at the door, expecting Dr. Chun to appear at any moment. The directory finished copying. She ejected the drive, shoved it in her pocket, tried to close the files and clear her tracks. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely navigate the mouse. The office door opened behind her. Nadia, Dr. Chin's voice was calm, almost gentle. What are you doing at my computer? She spun around, words jamming in her throat. He stood in the doorway, still in his white coat, his expression more disappointed than angry. Like she was a child caught doing something foolish rather than an employee who discovered his systematic exploitation of patients. I know you found them, he said, stepping into the office. I can see the access log, see what files were opened. The question is what you plan to do about it. Nadia found her voice, though it came out strangled and thin. Those photos are illegal. You violated patient privacy. You violated me. I'm going to report you. Something shifted in his expression, the kind facade cracking to reveal something colder underneath. To whom exactly? The medical board that I serve on? The police department, whose annual health screenings I perform for free? You're a bright girl, Nadia. Surely you understand that I'm not operating alone. These photos belong to people who paid very well for them. People who have resources you can't imagine. People you really don't want to cross. The implications hit her like ice water. This wasn't just one doctor with a camera and some boundary issues. This was organized, systematic, part of something larger and darker than she'd understood. And she'd just stolen evidence from people who apparently had reach into law enforcement and medical governance. Dr. Chen took another step forward. Give me the USB drive, and we can forget this happened. I'll even write you a reference for nursing school. You can walk away clean. Nadia's fingers closed around the drive in her pocket. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet stayed frozen to the floor. She could barely breathe, barely think past the panic flooding her system. I'm going to need an answer, Nadia. Dr. Chen's voice had gone flat, empty of the warmth she'd once thought was genuine. One way or another, I'm getting that drive back. She ran, shoved past him hard enough to make him stumble, bolted through the office door and down the hall. Her bag was still at the reception desk, and she grabbed it without stopping, fingers fumbling with the lock on the front door. Behind her, Dr. Chen was shouting something, but she couldn't hear past the blood rushing in her ears. The lock finally turned, and she burst into the hallway, into the elevator, stabbing the lobby button with shaking hands. The doors closed just as Dr. Chen appeared at the end of the hall. His face was cold now, all pretense of kindness gone. She'd seen the monster underneath, and they both knew there was no going back from this. The elevator descended. Nadia tried to think, tried to plan. She couldn't go home. If Dr. Chen had the kind of connections he'd implied, her apartment would be the first place they'd look. She couldn't go to the police, not yet, not without knowing who was compromised. She needed help, needed safety, needed to figure out what the hell to do with evidence against people who apparently had resources she couldn't imagine. The lobby was empty when the elevator opened, just the security guard at his desk who barely looked up as she hurried past. Outside, the rain had intensified, November cold and cutting. Nadia ran, no destination in mind, just away from the building and whatever was coming next. She made it 3 blocks before the black SUV cut her off. It came out of nowhere, smooth and silent, pulling directly into her path on the empty street. Nadia skidded to a stop, already pivoting to run the other way, but 2 men in dark suits were emerging from the vehicle, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that said they did this regularly. Ms. Reeves, one of them said, his voice professionally neutral. Please come with us. Mr. Marcelli would like to speak with you. She didn't know who Mr. Marcelli was, didn't care. She tried to bolt anyway, but they were faster, blocking her escape routes without ever quite touching her. Not aggressive, not violent, just inevitable. The message was clear. She could get in the SUV willingly, or they would make her. Either way, she was going with them. Nadia's mind raced through options and found none. She was soaked from the rain, exhausted from panic, holding evidence that apparently very dangerous people wanted back. Maybe these men were with Dr. Chen. Maybe they were with whoever bought the photos. Maybe she was about to disappear like the women Dr. Chen had implied were already gone. Or maybe, some desperate part of her whispered, they were someone else entirely. Someone who might actually help. She got in the SUV. The back seat was leather and warm, a stark contrast to the cold rain outside. And sitting across from her, looking at her with dark eyes that missed absolutely nothing, was a man who radiated the kind of power that needed no introduction. He was probably mid-30s, tall even sitting down, with the kind of build that suggested he could be extremely dangerous if he chose. His suit was expensive, tailored perfectly, and there was something about the way he held himself that said he was used to being obeyed. Ms. Reeves, he said, his voice low and calm. My name is Dante Marcelli. I apologize for the dramatic introduction, but we're operating on a tight timeline. I believe you have something that belongs to a network I've been investigating for quite some time. He gestured to the seat beside him, where photos were spread out like a hand of cards. Nadia's stomach dropped as she recognized them. Her photos, the ones from Dr. Chen's computer, plus dozens of others, women she didn't recognize, all captured in the same invasive clinical style. How do you have those? She whispered. Because I've been tracking this operation for 18 months, Dante said. Dr. Richard Chun is part of a trafficking ring that exploits medical practices to obtain compromising images of patients. These photos are sold to buyers in underground networks, men who pay premium prices for that particular intersection of vulnerability and intimacy. Some of the women whose images were sold have disappeared entirely. Others have been blackmailed, extorted, or worse. Nadia felt like she might be sick. The reality was somehow worse than what she'd already feared. This wasn't just privacy violation. This was systematic exploitation with real, devastating consequences for the victims. I don't understand, she managed. Why are you telling me this? Who are you? Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been old pain. I'm someone who knows what these networks do to people. I'm someone who has resources that law enforcement doesn't. And I'm someone who can help you, MS. Reeves, but only if you're willing to trust me and cooperate with my methods. Your methods, Nadia repeated. You mean illegal methods? I mean effective methods. Dante leaned forward slightly, and Nadia caught the scent of expensive cologne, saw the way his suit jacket moved over his shoulders. Everything about him screamed wealth and power and danger, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't quite as cold as she'd expected. The choice is yours. You can take that USB drive to the police, hope you find someone who isn't compromised, watch Dr. Chin get a good lawyer, and walk away while the network continues operating. Or you can work with me. Let me protect you while we dismantle this operation from the inside and make sure every single person involved pays for what they've done. Nadia's hand instinctively went to her pocket, to the drive that held evidence against a trafficking ring with apparently unlimited reach. She was in so far over her head, she couldn't even see the surface anymore. Every option felt impossible. Every path felt like it led to disaster. But looking at Dante Marcelli, at the photos spread across the seat beside him, at the steady intensity in his dark eyes, she realized she'd already made her choice. Maybe she'd made it the moment she copied those files. Maybe she'd made it the moment she got in this SUV. Maybe she'd been hurtling toward this decision from the second she'd noticed Dr. Chun taking photos he shouldn't have been taking. What do I have to do? She asked quietly. Dante's expression shifted, something that might have been respect crossing his features. First, you come with me somewhere safe. Then we talk about how we're going to burn this entire network to the ground. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in downtown Portland, the kind of address that didn't advertise itself with gaudy signage but didn't need to. Everyone who mattered already knew what living here meant. The elevator required a key card to access the private floor, and when the doors opened directly into Dante's home, Nadia felt her breath catch despite everything else she was processing. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides of the space, offering a panoramic view of the city lights spread out like scattered diamonds against the darkness. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the glass streaked and the city below washed clean. The interior was all modern lines and expensive furniture, leather and dark wood, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered old money and real power. A kitchen that looked like it belonged in a restaurant occupied one corner, all professional-grade appliances and marble countertops. The living area had a fireplace that was currently lit, casting warm light across furniture that probably cost more than Nadia made in a year. She stood just inside the elevator, dripping rainwater onto what was undoubtedly an expensive rug, feeling completely and utterly out of place. "Make yourself comfortable," Dante said, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. "I'll get you something dry to change into. We need to keep you here tonight at minimum. Your apartment isn't safe." The casual way he said it, like her entire life being upended was just a minor logistical problem, made something hot and panicky rise in Nadia's chest. She'd been running on adrenaline since finding those photos, and now that she'd stopped moving, the reality of her situation was crashing over her in waves. Her boss had been selling intimate photos of her to strangers. She'd fled her job with stolen evidence. She was standing in a penthouse belonging to a man who was clearly involved in organized crime, with no plan and no idea what happened next. "I can't stay here," she heard herself say, even though she had nowhere else to go. "I don't even know you. I should go to the police, or a hotel, or something." Dante turned to face her fully, and there was something in his expression that was patient but immovable. "If you go to a hotel, Dr. Chin's associates will find you within hours. If you go to the police without knowing who's compromised, you'll be handing that evidence directly to people who will destroy it and you along with it. You're safe here, Ms. Reeves." That's not a request or a threat. It's a fact. The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring, but instead it just reminded Nadia how little control she had over anything anymore. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was shaking, though whether from cold or shock she couldn't say. Something shifted in Dante's expression, the commanding intensity softening slightly. "You've been through hell tonight. Let me get you dry clothes and something hot to drink, and then we'll talk about what comes next. One step at a time." Before Nadia could respond, the elevator chimed again, and a man emerged, younger than Dante by maybe 5 years, with sharp features and the kind of easy confidence that suggested he was used to being in dangerous situations. He took in the scene with a quick glance, his eyes landing on Nadia with obvious curiosity. "This is her," he said, statement not question. "Marco," Dante said, and there was a subtle warning in his tone. "Ms. Reeves has had a difficult evening. What do you have?" Marco pulled out a tablet, his expression turning serious. 3 more women had appointments with Dr. Chen this week. All of them fit the profile. Young, attractive, required imaging or examinations that would put them in vulnerable positions. Based on the pattern in the files, he'll photograph all of them. And we just got confirmation from our contact that there's an auction scheduled for next Friday. Underground network, invitation only. The photos from this week's appointments are going to be included in the listings. Nadia felt the room tilt. More women, more victims. And she'd almost convinced herself to walk away, to pretend she hadn't seen anything. The guilt hit her like a physical weight. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How many women total?" Marco glanced at Dante, who gave a slight nod. "In Dr. Chen's current files? 47 women over the past 18 months. But he's not the only doctor this network uses. We've identified at least 6 other medical practices in 3 states running the same operation. The total count is probably closer to 300 women who have been photographed and exploited without their knowledge." 300. The number was incomprehensible. 300 women going about their lives, trusting their doctors, having no idea that their most vulnerable moments had been documented and sold to the highest bidder. 300 women who might be blackmailed, stalked, or worse. Nadia's knees gave out. She didn't realize she was falling until Dante was there, catching her, guiding her to the leather couch by the fireplace. His hands were warm and steady, and despite everything, despite knowing he was dangerous and powerful and part of a world she didn't understand, his touch felt safe. "Breathe," he said quietly, crouching in front of her so they were eye level. "Just breathe, Nadia. You're safe here." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and something about the intimacy of it broke through her shock. She dragged in a shaky breath, then another, trying to anchor herself to something solid while her entire understanding of the world rearranged itself around this new, horrifying information. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, looking at Dante directly. "You said you've been investigating for 18 months. Nobody investigates something like this for that long unless it's personal. So what happened? Why do you care about this network?" Dante's expression shuddered for a moment, and Nadia thought he might refuse to answer. But then he stood, poured something amber into a crystal glass, and handed it to her before settling into the chair across from the couch. Marco had quietly retreated to the kitchen, giving them space while remaining close enough to hear. "My younger sister Juliana," Dante said, his voice carefully neutral in the way that suggested enormous emotion held tightly in check. 5 years ago, she was 20 years old, studying art in New York. Beautiful, talented, naive about the world. She went to a clinic for a routine gynecological exam. The doctor seemed professional, kind, trustworthy. He photographed her without her knowledge, sold those photos to a network exactly like this one. Nadia's heart clenched. The way Dante spoke about his sister, past tense, already told her how this story ended. The buyer who purchased Juliana's photos tracked her down, Dante continued. Started showing up places she'd be, making it clear he knew intimate details about her body, about her life. When she tried to go to the police, they couldn't help her. The photos were supposedly taken with consent, even though she had no memory of agreeing to them. The doctor denied everything. The buyer had enough money and connections to make the complaints disappear. Juliana felt violated, exposed, hunted. She started having panic attacks, stopped going to classes, couldn't sleep. He paused, took a breath, and Nadia saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. 6 months after those photos were taken, Juliana killed herself. Left a note saying she couldn't live knowing those images existed, knowing that stranger had stolen something from her that she could never get back. She was 20 years old, and these people destroyed her. The grief in his voice was old but not healed, a wound that had scarred over but never truly closed. Nadia felt tears burning in her eyes, for this girl she'd never met, for all the women who'd been violated the same way, for the horror of trusting someone with your body and having that trust weaponized against you. "I'm sorry," she whispered, inadequate words for an unspeakable loss. Dante's eyes met hers, and there was something fierce and protective burning in their depths. "I spent 2 years destroying the network that killed my sister. Tracked down every person involved, made sure they paid for what they did. And then I started looking for other networks, other operations exploiting vulnerable people the same way. Because Juliana wasn't unique. This is happening everywhere, to women who have no idea they're being targeted. And the system that's supposed to protect them is either complicit or powerless. So you protect them instead," Nadia said, understanding clicking into place. "Outside the system. Someone has to." Dante leaned forward slightly, his intensity focused entirely on her. "I can't bring Juliana back. Can't undo what was done to her. But I can make sure other women don't end up like her. I can make sure the people running these networks understand that there are consequences, that someone is watching, that they can't operate with impunity." It was vigilante justice, illegal and violent, and operating in the shadows. But it was also something else. It was grief turned into purpose, loss transformed into protection. Dante Marcelli was dangerous because he'd already lost the person he most wanted to protect, which meant he had nothing left to lose. And somehow, that made Nadia feel safer than any police report or legal proceeding ever could. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Dante studied her for a long moment, something like respect crossing his features. "Right now, you need to rest. Tomorrow, we'll start planning. You have access to Dr. Chen's clinic, knowledge of his schedule and security protocols, understanding of the medical side that my people don't have. With your help, we can identify all the buyers, shut down the auction, and make sure every person involved in this network faces consequences they can't buy or threaten their way out of. And if I help you," Nadia said slowly, working through the implications, "I'm part of this. Part of your world. Part of something that exists outside the law." "Yes." Dante didn't soften it, didn't try to make it sound better than it was. "But you're already part of this, Nadia. The moment you copied those files, you became a target. The moment Dr. Chen realized you had evidence, you stepped into a war you didn't even know existed. The only choice you have now is whether you trust me to keep you alive while we end this." He was right, and they both knew it. Nadia was already in too deep to back out. The only path forward was through, and the only person offering her any kind of protection or justice was a man who operated by his own rules and answered to no authority but his own moral code. She took a sip of whatever was in the glass he'd given her. Whiskey, expensive and smooth, burning warmth down her throat. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll help. Tell me what the plan is." Relief flickered across Dante's expression, subtle but real. "Tomorrow. Tonight, you need to sleep. Marco will stay here as additional security. You'll take the guest room, get some rest, and in the morning we'll figure out our next moves." Nadia wanted to argue, wanted to demand they start immediately, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that the adrenaline was finally fading. She nodded, too tired to do anything else. Dante stood, motioned for her to follow him down a hallway. The guest room was beautiful, all soft colors and comfortable furniture and windows that looked out over the glittering city. There was an attached bathroom with towels that were probably more expensive than her rent, and Dante disappeared for a moment before returning with clothes that would fit her well enough. "Get some rest," he said. "You're safe here. I promise." After he left, Nadia stood in the middle of the guest room, processing everything that had happened in the span of a few hours. This morning she'd been a medical assistant with a normal life and normal problems. Now she was a target, a witness, and an accomplice to whatever Dante Marcelli had planned for Dr. Chun and the trafficking network. She showered, washing away the rain and sweat and lingering feeling of violation. Put on the soft shirt and pants Dante had provided, clothes that smelled clean and expensive, climbed into a bed with sheets that felt like silk against her skin, and tried to sleep while her mind raced through everything she'd learned, everything she'd lost, everything that was still to come. Sleep didn't find her. At 2 in the morning, she gave up, pulled on the robe hanging in the closet, and ventured out of the guest room. The penthouse was quiet but not dark. Low lights illuminated the hallway, and she could see the city lights still twinkling through the massive windows. She found the kitchen, thought maybe tea or water might help, and discovered she wasn't the only one awake. Dante stood at the counter, also in sleep clothes, a t-shirt and pants that were far more casual than the suit he'd worn earlier. He was making coffee, and when he heard her footsteps, he turned without surprise. "Can't sleep," he said. Statement, not question. Nadia shook her head, moving to sit on one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those photos. See all those women's faces. See myself from angles I never wanted anyone to see." "I know," Dante said quietly, pouring coffee into 2 mugs and sliding one across to her. "Cream and sugar in the cabinet if you want them. The violation doesn't fade quickly. Sometimes it doesn't fade at all. You just learn to carry it." "Is that what you did?" Nadia asked. "After your sister?" Dante's hands wrapped around his mug, and for a long moment he didn't answer. "Then, I turned it into rage. Channeled everything I felt into hunting down the people responsible. It probably wasn't healthy, but it was what kept me functional. Grief is useless if it just sits there. Rage, at least, can be weaponized." Nadia studied him in the low kitchen light. This dangerous man who'd opened his home to her, who'd shared his deepest loss, who was offering her protection and revenge in equal measure. He was probably 6'1" or 6'2", she realized, with the kind of build that came from actual physical work rather than just gym time. His dark hair was slightly mussed from trying to sleep, and without the suit armor, he looked younger, more human. Still dangerous, still powerful, but also wounded in ways that matched her own fresh pain. "My parents are immigrants," Nadia heard herself saying. "Came here from Iran when I was 5. Worked 3 jobs between them to make sure I had opportunities they never got. Everything I built carefully. Stayed in school, stayed out of trouble, followed all the rules because that's what you do when you're trying to prove you belong. And now I'm sitting in a penthouse with a criminal, planning to destroy a trafficking network through illegal means, and somehow this feels more right than anything I've ever done." Dante's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Sometimes the rules don't work. Sometimes the system is designed to protect the predators instead of the prey. That doesn't make you wrong for working outside it. It makes you practical. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee at 2 in the morning while the city slept below them. Nadia felt something shift between them, the dynamic changing from protector and victim to something more complicated. 2 people wounded by the same kind of evil, finding unexpected common ground in the middle of the night. "Thank you," she said eventually, "for this, for helping me, for caring about those women even though you don't know them." "I care because I do know them," Dante replied. "Every single one is someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone who trusted the wrong person and paid for it. Juliana taught me that. Her death taught me that no one else should have to learn the same lesson." His grief was so raw, even after 5 years, that Nadia felt her own eyes burn with tears. She reached across the counter, placed her hand over his. The contact was electric, warmth and connection and awareness all flooding through her at once. His hand was large and warm under hers, slightly rough, and when he turned it over to lace their fingers together, she didn't pull away. "We're going to stop them," she said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "Chun and the network and all of it. We're going to make sure no one else ends up like Juliana or like me." Dante's dark eyes met hers, and something passed between them that felt like a promise, like an alliance forged in shared trauma and determination. "Yes," he said simply. "We are." The moment stretched, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Dante released her hand, the connection broken but not forgotten. "You should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense." Nadia nodded, but as she stood to return to the guest room, her phone buzzed in the pocket of her robe. She'd almost forgotten she still had it. The text message made her blood run cold. It was from an unknown number. Just 3 words and a photo. She showed it to Dante wordlessly. The message read, "We know everything." The photo was of her apartment building. "Taken tonight. Recently." Dante's expression hardened immediately. "Marco," he called out, and his second appeared from wherever he'd been keeping watch. "We have a problem. They found her address faster than expected." He looked at Nadia. and there was something fierce and protective in his gaze that made her feel simultaneously safe and terrified. "You're not leaving this penthouse until we've neutralized this threat. Understood?" Nadia nodded, her earlier exhaustion replaced by sharp, cutting fear. Whoever was behind this network, they were organized, resourced, and apparently very good at tracking their targets. She'd thought she had time to figure things out, time to plan. But time, it seemed, was a luxury she didn't have. "We move fast," Dante said, already pulling out his own phone. "Marco, get the team assembled. First thing tomorrow, we start our own investigation. If they want to play hunter and prey, they're about to learn they picked the wrong prey." As Marco made calls and Dante strategized, Nadia stood in the kitchen of this beautiful penthouse, looking out at the city that suddenly felt far more dangerous than it had just hours ago. She'd wanted justice. She'd wanted to help those women. She'd wanted to do the right thing. But she was beginning to understand that the right thing might cost her everything she'd carefully built. Her career, her safety, her carefully constructed life as a law-abiding citizen. All of it was already gone, shattered the moment she'd seen those photos. All she had left was the truth, a USB drive full of evidence, and a dangerous man who'd promised to keep her alive. It would have to be enough. Morning came too early, pale winter light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows and dragging Nadia from restless sleep. She'd managed maybe 3 hours total, her mind cycling through everything that had happened, everything still to come. The threat from last night hung over her like a storm cloud. The photo of her apartment building a stark reminder that whoever was behind this network had resources and reach she couldn't begin to comprehend. But lying in bed hiding wasn't going to solve anything. Nadia had never been the kind of person who waited for problems to resolve themselves, and she wasn't about to start now. These people had violated her, had violated hundreds of women, and they were still out there doing it. 3 more women had appointments with Dr. Chen this week. 3 more potential victims who had no idea what was coming. She showered, dressed in the clothes Dante had provided yesterday since she had nothing else, and emerged from the guest room to find the penthouse already alive with activity. Marco was at the dining table with 2 other people she hadn't met yet, all 3 of them studying laptops and tablets covered in what looked like surveillance footage and documents. Dante stood by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and authoritative as he gave someone instructions. He ended the call when he noticed her, his dark eyes taking in her appearance with an assessment that felt both protective and appreciating. "You're awake. Good. We have a lot to cover." The other 2 people at the table looked up, and Dante made introductions. "This is Leo, our tech specialist. If it's digital, he can access it, track it, or destroy it. And this is Maria. She works with trafficking survivors and has more insight into how these networks operate than anyone else I know." Leo was maybe 30, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of pale complexion that suggested he spent most of his time in front of screens. He gave Nadia a friendly nod, his fingers still moving across his keyboard. "Welcome to the team. Sorry it's under these circumstances." Maria was closer to Nadia's age, with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much. There was a hardness to her that spoke of survival, but when she smiled at Nadia, there was genuine warmth underneath. "I heard what you did," she said. "Taking that evidence, running. That took guts. Most people convinced themselves they didn't see what they saw." "I couldn't just ignore it," Nadia said quietly. "Not when I knew other women were being hurt." Something shifted in Maria's expression, a flicker of approval and understanding. "That's why you're going to survive this. The ones who make it are the ones who decide they're worth fighting for." Nadia joined them at the table, accepting the coffee Marco slid across to her without comment. The USB drive she'd stolen sat in the center of the table, innocuous and small, containing evidence that could potentially bring down an entire trafficking network. Leo had apparently spent most of the night analyzing its contents. "The files are extensive," Leo said, pulling up spreadsheets and folders on his screen. Dr. Chin kept meticulous records. Every patient photographed, every sale completed, every buyer identified by a code name. He was documenting his own crimes like they were legitimate business transactions. "Can you identify the buyers from the codes?" Nadia asked. "Some of them." Leo adjusted his glasses. "The network uses a dark web marketplace for transactions. Encrypted, anonymous, nearly impossible to trace under normal circumstances. But Dr. Chun kept a separate file with real names and contact information for his frequent buyers. Probably for blackmail insurance in case anyone tried to cut him out. So we have names, Dante said, moving to stand behind Leo's chair, his presence commanding even in casual clothes. We have evidence of sales, of exploitation, of the entire pipeline from doctor to buyer. What we need now is to identify the person running this operation. Dr. Chun is middle management. Someone higher up is coordinating all these medical practices, facilitating the sales, protecting the network from law enforcement. Nadia's mind was already working through the problem. I can help with that. I have access to Dr. Chen's clinic, his files, his schedule. If he's reporting to someone, there will be communications, meetings, transactions that don't look medical. Absolutely not. Dante said immediately, his tone flat and final. You're not going back to that clinic. They know you took the evidence. Dr. Chun will be watching for you. Then I'll tell him I want in, Nadia countered, surprised by her own boldness. I'll say I copied the files for leverage, that I want a cut of the profits instead of going to the police. He already thinks I'm compromised. I'll just be confirming his assumption. The room went silent. Marco, Leo, and Maria all looked at Dante, clearly waiting for his response. Nadia could see the war playing out across his features, the strategic part of his brain recognizing the value of her plan, while every protective instinct screamed at him to keep her far away from danger. It's too risky, he said finally. If Dr. Chin suspects you're wearing a wire or working with someone, he'll have you killed. These people don't negotiate with threats. But they do negotiate with greed, Maria interjected quietly. If Nadia approaches this right, positions herself as someone who wants money instead of justice, Chin might believe her. Medical assistants don't make much. It's plausible she'd rather profit than report. Dante's jaw tightened, but he didn't immediately dismiss the idea. Nadia pressed her advantage. You said yourself you need someone on the inside who understands the medical side. That's me. I know Chin's patterns, his security protocols, where he keeps sensitive files. I can get you information your team can't access any other way. And I'm already a target, so the danger isn't new. At least this way, I'm doing something useful instead of just hiding. For a long moment, Dante stared at her, and Nadia met his gaze without flinching. She meant what she'd said. Hiding felt like letting those women down, like choosing her own safety over justice. That wasn't who she was, wasn't who she wanted to be. If we do this, Dante said slowly, we do it my way. You wear a wire at all times. Marco and I are in a van within 50 feet of the clinic. At the first sign of trouble, you abort and get out. And if Chun even looks at you wrong, I'm coming through that door. Understood? Understood, Nadia agreed, relief flooding through her. She wasn't going to be a passive victim in this. She was going to fight back. The next hour was spent preparing. Leo fitted Nadia with a nearly invisible wire, a tiny device that would transmit everything she said directly to Dante's team. They rehearsed her approach, what to say to Chun, how to make her offer credible without tipping him off to the larger operation. Maria coached her on body language, on projecting greed instead of fear, on making herself seem like someone who could be bought. The entire time, Nadia was intensely aware of Dante watching her, his dark eyes tracking her every movement with an intensity that made her skin prickle. There was something different in the way he looked at her now, something beyond the protective assessment from before, something that felt like possession and admiration mixed together. By mid-morning, they were ready. Nadia climbed into the back of an unmarked van with Dante and Marco, while Leo stayed at the penthouse monitoring the digital surveillance. The drive to Dr. Chin's clinic felt surreal. Nadia retracing a route she'd taken hundreds of times before, but now as someone completely different. Yesterday, she'd been an employee. Today, she was an infiltrator. You don't have to do this, Dante said quietly as they parked 2 blocks from the clinic. We can find another way. Nadia shook her head. Yes, I do. Those 3 women have appointments this week. If I don't stop Chin now, they become victims too. I can't live with that. Something fierce and proud flashed across Dante's face. You're braver than you know, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made warmth bloom in Nadia's chest despite her fear. She left the van, walking the familiar 2 blocks to the medical building. The clinic wouldn't be open yet, but Dr. Chun was always there early. Nadia used her key card to access the building, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and stepped into the office she'd fled from just yesterday. Dr. Chun was at the front desk computer, probably trying to assess the damage from her theft. He looked up when she entered, and she saw shock cross his features, followed quickly by wariness. "Nadia," he said carefully. "I wasn't expecting you." "I imagine not," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered. "After what I found, after what you told me, I figured you'd assume I'd run straight to the police." Dr. Chin stood slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "And yet here you are." Nadia forced herself to move closer, to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Here I am. Because I spent last night thinking about what you said. About the people you work with, the resources they have, the fact that someone like me going to the police would accomplish exactly nothing. You were right. I'd report you. You'd get a good lawyer, and I'd be left with nothing but a ruined reputation and no job. So what do you want?" Dr. Chen asked, suspicion clear in his tone. "A cut," Nadia said bluntly. "I know how much those photos sell for. I've seen the transaction records. You've made hundreds of thousands of dollars exploiting patients who trust you. I want in. 20% of future sales, and I keep quiet about everything I found." She could hear Dante's breathing through the wire, harsh and controlled. Could imagine him in the van, fists clenched, forcing himself to let this play out. Dr. Chin studied her for a long moment. "Why would I believe you won't go to the police the moment you have money?" "Because I'm smarter than that," Nadia replied. "Money from you means I'm complicit. Means I can't report you without implicating myself. It's insurance for both of us. You get my silence and my help, I get financial security. Everyone wins." It was a terrible argument morally, but strategically it made sense. Dr. Chin's expression shifted, suspicion giving way to calculation. Nadia held her breath, waiting to see if he'd buy it. 20% is too much," he said finally. "But I could offer you 10% of my cut. That's still substantial money, Nadia. More than you'd make in 5 years of legitimate work." She forced herself to look disappointed. To negotiate like this was a real business transaction. 15%. "I'm taking a significant risk here. 12%, and I'll include you in the intake process. You can help identify which patients are most valuable, help position them for the best photographs. Your medical knowledge makes you useful." Nadia felt sick hearing him talk so casually about exploiting vulnerable women, but she kept her expression neutral. "Deal. But I need proof this operation is as secure as you claim. I need to know who you're working with, who's buying these photos, how the network operates. I'm not getting involved blind." Dr. Chin smiled, and it was a cold, calculating expression. "Smart girl. I always knew you were bright. Come into my office. I'll show you exactly how this works." Nadia followed him, every nerve in her body screaming at her to run. But she needed this information, needed to identify the people running this network. For Juliana. For the women in those photos. For herself. Dr. Chin opened his laptop, pulled up files she hadn't seen on the office computer. The network is run by a man named Vincent Zhao. He owns a chain of modeling agencies up and down the West Coast. But that's just the front. His real business is acquiring and selling compromising images and videos. He coordinates with medical practices, photography studios, massage parlors, anywhere people are vulnerable and undressed. Nadia's stomach turned, but she forced herself to lean closer, to look interested instead of horrified. "How many practices does he work with?" "At least 20 that I know of. Maybe more." Dr. Chin pulled up a contact list. "Zhao provides legal protection, handles the sales and distribution, takes 40% of all profits. In exchange, we get clients, security, and insurance that no one interferes with our operations." "And if someone does interfere," Nadia asked, "like if a patient finds out, then Zhao's people handle it." Dr. Chin's tone went flat. Quietly, efficiently. "It's only happened twice in the 3 years I've worked with him. Both times, the problem disappeared." Disappeared. The word hung heavy with implication. These people had killed to protect their operation, and Dr. Chun was admitting it casually like it was just another business expense. Through the wire, she could hear Dante's sharp intake of breath. She needed to get the client list, needed something concrete that Leo could use to identify buyers and trace them back to Zhao. "I want to see the buyer list," she said. "If I'm going to help select patients, I need to know what kind of images sell best." Dr. Chen hesitated, then pulled up another file. "This list is encrypted and highly protected. If it ever got out, we'd all be exposed. But since you're part of this now, You should understand the market. He turned the laptop screen toward her, and Nadia forced herself to study the names and transaction histories, memorizing as much as she could. The wire would capture everything. Leo would record it all, but she wanted to remember these people personally. Wanted to know exactly who had profited from women's exploitation. One name kept appearing at the top of the purchase list. Vincent Zhao himself, buying more photos than anyone else. This wasn't just business for him. This was personal gratification combined with profit. Dr. Chun was still talking, explaining the auction process, the bidding system, the delivery methods. Nadia let him talk, let him incriminate himself and his entire network while the wire captured every word. She was so focused on memorizing information that she almost missed the shift in his demeanor. You know what's interesting, Nadia, Dr. Chen said, his tone changing. You show up here less than 24 hours after stealing my files, claiming you want money instead of justice. But you haven't actually asked about payment methods, haven't tried to negotiate specific terms, haven't shown any real interest in the practical details of getting paid. Nadia's blood went cold. I'm interested in understanding the operation first, she said carefully. Payment details come after I know this is legitimate. Or, Dr. Chen continued, standing up from his chair, you're wearing a wire and working with whoever sent you that message last night. The one that spooked you enough to run to someone for help. He knew. Somehow he knew. Nadia's hand instinctively went to her throat where the wire was hidden, and that tiny movement was all the confirmation Dr. Chen needed. His hand went to his desk drawer, and Nadia knew with terrible certainty what he was reaching for. She bolted, running for the office door. Behind her, she heard Dr. Chen shouting, heard footsteps that weren't his alone. He had security here, people she hadn't seen, hadn't anticipated. She burst through the office door into the reception area, heading for the exit. The front door was right there, so close, but two men in dark suits were emerging from the elevator, clearly responding to some signal Dr. Chen had sent. Nadia changed direction, heading for the emergency stairs. Behind her, Dr. Chun was yelling for them to stop her, to get the wire, to find out who she was working with. Her hands hit the stairwell door, and she was through, taking stairs two at a time, her breath coming in harsh gasps. Dante's voice crackled through the wire. Where are you? Nadia, tell me where you are. Stairwell, she gasped. East side. He knows I'm wired. There are men chasing me. Get to the parking garage, Dante commanded, and his voice was cold with fury barely held in check. Level P2, southeast corner. I'm coming for you. Nadia burst through the door at ground level, sprinted across the lobby while the security guard yelled at her to stop. She hit the parking garage entrance at full speed, taking the ramp down to P2 while heavy footsteps echoed behind her. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she kept running because stopping meant capture, and capture meant death. The parking garage was dim and nearly empty this early in the morning. Nadia couldn't see Dante, couldn't see the van, couldn't see anything but concrete pillars and parked cars, and the southeast corner that felt impossibly far away. Then she heard the screech of tires, and a black SUV came tearing around the corner. Not the unmarked van from earlier. Something faster, more aggressive. It cut between her and her pursuers, and the back door flew open. Get in, Dante's voice commanded, and Nadia didn't hesitate. She dove into the back seat, and the SUV was moving before the door even closed. Through the back window, she saw the men who'd been chasing her skid to a stop, their faces twisted with frustration. Dante pulled her against his chest, one arm wrapped around her while he gave Marco driving instructions with the other. His heart was hammering against her ear, his breathing harsh, and his entire body was rigid with barely controlled rage. Are you hurt? He demanded. Did they touch you? I'm fine, Nadia gasped. I got the information, Dante. The network leader is Vincent Zhao. He runs modeling agencies. Chen named at least 20 medical practices involved. Leo has it all on the recording. But Dante wasn't processing that information yet, was too focused on the fact that she'd been in danger. His hand cupped her face, tilting it up so he could see her clearly, and the intensity in his dark eyes stole her breath. You could have been killed, if they caught you. They didn't, she said. You got there in time. Barely, he bit out. You have no idea how close that was, Nadia. If you'd been 5 seconds slower, if that security guard had been faster. But I wasn't, and he wasn't, and I'm safe, she said, and realized she was shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing. She pressed closer to Dante, seeking the solid warmth of his body, and felt his arms tighten around her. They stayed like that for the entire drive back to the penthouse, Nadia wrapped in Dante's protective embrace, while Marco navigated traffic and muttered into a phone. The fear was fading, replaced by exhilaration and something else, something hot and electric that crackled between them. When they finally pulled into the building's underground parking, Dante helped her out of the SUV, his hands lingering on her waist. They stood there in the concrete darkness, both breathing hard, awareness sparking between them like a live wire. "You scared me," he said quietly. "I've handled dangerous operations for years, watched my people walk into threat situations dozens of times. But hearing you run, hearing the fear in your voice, that was different. That was—" He didn't finish, but Nadia understood what he meant. Something had shifted between them, the dynamic changing from protector and protected to something far more complicated. "I know," she said, her hands resting on his chest, feeling his heartbeat still racing under her palms. "I heard you through the wire. You weren't calm or detached. You were terrified. For good reason," Dante replied. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin, and Nadia's breath caught. "If something had happened to you, if Chun had hurt you because I let you walk in there." The moment stretched between them, charged and intense, his face inches from hers. Nadia could see the war in his eyes, want and restraint battling each other. She knew he was holding back, knew he wouldn't cross this line while she was vulnerable and scared and dependent on his protection. But she wanted him to. Wanted to feel something other than fear and violation. Wanted to anchor herself to something real and solid and warm. Wanted him with an intensity that scared her almost as much as the chase had. The elevator dinged behind them, and Marco cleared his throat pointedly. "We should get upstairs. Leo will want to debrief, and we need to analyze what Nadia got from Chun." The moment broke. Dante stepped back, his expression shuddering, though his eyes still burned with barely suppressed heat. "Right. Yes. Let's see what we're working with." The next few hours were spent in strategy sessions. Leo confirmed that the wire had captured everything, that they now had Vincent Zhao identified as the network leader and confirmation of at least 20 compromised medical practices. It was more information than Dante's team had gathered in months of investigation. "This changes everything," Leo said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "Zhao's organizations are all legitimate fronts. If we can prove they're covers for trafficking operations, we can bring down the entire network at once. But we need more than recorded conversation," Maria added. "We need physical evidence, financial records, proof of the sales themselves. Chen admitting things on tape helps, but a good lawyer will claim Nadia misunderstood or that he was lying to impress her." "So we hit the auction," Dante said. "It's scheduled for next Friday. That's where the sales happen, where the buyers gather, where the evidence will be undeniable." Nadia wanted to help plan, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. The adrenaline that had kept her sharp during the infiltration was gone, leaving her drained and shaky. Dante noticed immediately. "You need rest," he said, his tone gentler than it had been all day. "Go lie down for a while. We'll strategize without you." She wanted to argue, but her body was already giving out. Nadia retreated to the guest room, collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, and fell into dreamless sleep almost instantly. When she woke, it was late afternoon, the winter sun already setting and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She emerged from the guest room to find the penthouse quiet. Marco had left. Leo was gone. Only Dante remained, in the kitchen, doing something that smelled incredible. "You cook," she said, surprised. Dante looked up from whatever he was doing at the stove, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I cook. My mother insisted all her children learn. Said she didn't raise helpless men who couldn't feed themselves." The domesticity of the scene was jarring after everything else. Here was this dangerous man who commanded criminal operations and destroyed trafficking networks, making what looked like pasta from scratch in his expensive kitchen. The contradiction was oddly endearing. "Are you making dinner?" Nadia asked, moving to lean against the counter. "I thought you could use real food," Dante replied. "You've been running on coffee and adrenaline for 2 days. That's not sustainable." They worked in companionable silence for a while, Dante cooking while Nadia watched, and occasionally helped when he asked. There was something intimate about the shared space, the casual domesticity, the way they moved around each other without awkwardness. Over dinner, pasta that was genuinely excellent, and wine that probably cost more than Nadia's monthly rent, they talked. Not about the case or the danger or the plan. About other things. Their families, their histories, the choices that had led them to this point. My father wanted me to be a doctor, Dante said. Traditional Italian family. Expectations of respectability and legitimate success. But I watched how the legitimate world failed Juliana, how the system protected the predators and blamed the victims. I decided I'd rather be effective than respectable. And now you're both, Nadia observed. You have legitimate businesses that make you wealthy and respected. But you use that cover to do the work the system won't. Dante's expression was complicated, shadows and light. The legitimate businesses fund the important work. And they give people like Marco and Leo and Maria jobs and purpose. But yes, the real work happens in the shadows. They migrated to the couch after dinner, supposedly to review files, but really just sitting close together, the laptop open between them, but largely ignored. Nadia was intensely aware of Dante's proximity, the way his shoulder brushed hers, the warmth radiating from his body. You're not what I expected, she said quietly. When your men brought me to you that first night, I thought you'd be cold, cruel, someone who'd use my fear to control me. But you're not that person at all. Dante's dark eyes met hers. What kind of person am I then? Someone who grieves, she said. Someone who turned loss into purpose, who protects people you don't even know because you couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. You're dangerous, yes, but not cruel. Never cruel. His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the couch between them. The contact was electric, charged with days of building tension. I could be cruel to people who deserve it, he said. To Dr. Chun, to Vincent Zhao, to every person who profits from exploitation. I would enjoy making them suffer for what they've done. But not to me, Nadia said. Never to you. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, and heat pooled low in Nadia's stomach. You're brave and fierce, and you walked into danger without hesitation to help women you've never met. How could I be cruel to someone like that? The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither of them was saying. Nadia's pulse raced as Dante leaned slightly closer, his eyes dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. She could close the distance, could bridge the gap, and finally know what his mouth felt like against hers. But before she could move, before either of them could cross that line, Dante's phone rang. He closed his eyes briefly, something like frustration crossing his features, before pulling back to answer it. It was Maria, her voice urgent even through the speaker. We have a problem. I went by Nadia's apartment to grab some of her things, and the place has been tossed. Someone broke in, searched everything. They were looking for something specific. The drive, Nadia said, her stomach sinking. They're looking for the USB drive with the files. Dante's expression hardened. Did they take anything? Her laptop, some documents, photos. Maria's voice was grim. And Dante? They left a message on her bathroom mirror. Written in lipstick. Says, we know you're with Marcelli. You both have 3 days. 3 days until what? Dante demanded. 3 days until the auction, Maria replied. I think they're saying if you don't deliver Nadia and the evidence by then, they're coming for both of you. Dante ended the call, and for a long moment he just stared at the wall, his jaw tight. Then he stood, paced to the windows, looked out at the city lights. Nadia joined him, standing close enough to feel his tension. They're escalating, she said quietly. Yes. Dante's voice was cold, controlled fury. Dr. Chin must have reported your infiltration to Zhao immediately. Now the entire network knows we're coming for them. They're trying to scare us into backing down or making a mistake. What do we do? Nadia asked. Dante turned to face her fully, and there was something fierce and protective blazing in his dark eyes. We accelerate our timeline. We don't wait for the auction. We go after Zhao directly, tonight if possible. And you stay here with Marco as additional security. No more field work, no more risks. I almost lost you today, and I'm not taking that chance again. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her, should have triggered her independent streak. Instead, it made warmth bloom in her chest because it came from caring, from genuine fear for her safety rather than a need to control her. I'm not fragile, she said. I can handle this. I know you can, Dante replied. I've watched you be braver in 2 days than most people are in a lifetime. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you keep walking into danger when I have the resources to protect you. Let me, Nadia repeated, catching on that phrase. You're not asking permission. You're telling me. Something like guilt crossed Dante's expression. I know what that sounds like. I know it seems controlling. But Nadia, if something happened to you, if these people hurt you because I let you take risks you didn't need to take, I couldn't. He broke off, and Nadia saw the truth written across his face. This wasn't about control. This was about a man who'd already lost someone he loved to these networks, who was terrified of history repeating itself. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay here. But only because you're right that I've done my part. The information I got today is enough. You don't need me for the rest. Relief flooded Dante's features. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, let his hand linger against her cheek. Thank you. For understanding. For being reasonable even though I know your instinct is to fight beside me. They stood like that for a long moment, close enough that Nadia could feel his breath on her face, could see the silver flecks in his dark eyes. The moment from earlier was back, that charged awareness, that knowledge that something significant was building between them. But this time, Dante stepped back deliberately. Not yet, he said, his voice rough. When this is over, when you're safe and the threat is neutralized and you're not dependent on my protection, then we can explore whatever this is between us. But not while you're vulnerable. Not while I'm all that stands between you and people who want to hurt you. Nadia understood what he was saying, even appreciated the restraint that came from respect rather than lack of interest. But that didn't make the waiting any easier, didn't cool the heat that burned between them every time they were close. When this is over, she agreed. But Dante? I'm not imagining this, am I? This connection between us? His eyes darkened with heat and promise. No, Nadia, you're not imagining it. When this is over, I intend to spend considerable time showing you exactly how not imaginary it is. The promise in those words sent shivers down her spine. 3 days until the auction. 3 days until Dante confronted Vincent Zhao and the entire network. 3 days until her safety was no longer in question. And then, Nadia thought as she watched Dante make phone calls and coordinate with his team, then she would find out what it meant to be wanted by a man like Dante Marcelli. She should be terrified, should be questioning every choice that had led her to this point. But instead, standing in his penthouse while he planned to take down a trafficking network, she realized she'd never felt more certain of anything in her life. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The breakthrough came on the 3rd day, when Nadia had been living in Dante's penthouse for 72 hours and felt like she'd aged years in that time. Leo had been working non-stop, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards, screens glowing with code and encrypted files, muttering to himself in a mixture of English and what sounded like frustrated cursing in at least 3 other languages. Then he sat back, pushed his glasses up his nose, and said quietly, I'm in. Dante was across the room immediately, Nadia right behind him. Leo's screen showed what looked like a website, but darker, more sinister. A marketplace with categories and listings, all of it designed to look professional and legitimate while selling something deeply illegal. This is Zhao's auction platform, Leo explained. Fully encrypted, accessible only through invitation and multiple authentication layers. But I traced the server route from Dr. Chen's IP address and managed to crack their security protocols. This is where the sale happens, where the buyers gather to bid on exploited women's images. Nadia felt her stomach clench as Leo navigated through the site. Categories organized by type of image, by age range, by the method of acquisition. Medical examinations had its own section, and when Leo opened it, Nadia saw dozens of women's photos, all taken in clinical settings, all without their knowledge or consent. The auction is scheduled for Friday night, Leo continued, pulling up a specific listing. They're featuring a premium collection this week. Medical images from multiple practices, including Dr. Chen's most recent acquisitions. He clicked on the listing, and Nadia's world tilted. Her own face stared back at her from the screen. Multiple photos, different angles, all from her annual physical 6 months ago. The listing described her as 28-year-old medical professional, Middle Eastern descent, high-quality clinical imaging, virgin collection. The bidding started at $50,000. Nadia couldn't breathe, couldn't process the violation of seeing herself displayed like merchandise, like her body and vulnerability were products to be purchased by strangers. The clinical description made it worse somehow, reducing her to demographic checkboxes and commodity features. She felt Dante's hand on her shoulder, warm and grounding, but she couldn't look away from the screen. Below her listing were others. Jessica Park from the clinic. Amanda Torres. Priya Desai. Women she knew, women she'd chatted with in exam rooms. Women who had no idea their most private moments were being sold to the highest bidder. How many? She whispered. How many total in this auction? 63 women, Leo said quietly. From 20 different medical practices across 3 states. Total projected revenue of $3.2 million. And that's just this week's auction. They run these every month. The scale of it was overwhelming. This wasn't a small operation or a few bad actors. This was systematic, organized, industrial-scale exploitation of vulnerable women. And Vincent Zhao was profiting millions from their violation. Dante's hand tightened on Nadia's shoulder. Can you identify the buyers? He asked Leo. Some of them. The platform requires verified accounts to bid, which means some level of identity confirmation. I can trace maybe 60% of the accounts to real people. The others are using corporate shields or offshore entities that will take longer to crack. How long before the auction? Dante asked. 72 hours. Friday at midnight. Invitation-only event at the Columbia Hotel downtown, disguised as a private art auction. Buyers will attend in person to verify their purchases and arrange discreet delivery of the digital files. Nadia finally found her voice. We have to stop it. Not just this auction, but all of them. Every buyer, every medical practice, everyone involved. We have to end this completely. Dante moved to stand in front of her, his dark eyes intense and focused entirely on her face. We will. I'm going in on Friday night, along with Marco and a team. We'll identify every buyer, copy their purchase records, and extract all the data from Zhao's servers. By Saturday morning, we'll have everything we need to destroy this network permanently. His certainty should have been reassuring, but all Nadia could think about was the danger he'd be walking into. Vincent Zhao wasn't going to give up his empire without a fight, and an auction full of wealthy criminals wasn't going to react well to being exposed. What if something goes wrong? She asked. What if Zhao's security is better than you expect, or someone recognizes you? Or Nadia? Dante's hands came up to frame her face, gentle but firm. This is what I do. I've infiltrated dozens of operations more dangerous than this. I have resources, training, and a team I trust completely. We're going to succeed. But what if you don't? She pressed. What if I'm sitting here waiting and you don't come back? What if Friday night is the last time I see you? Something shifted in Dante's expression, the professional mask cracking to show the man underneath. The man who was just as scared as she was, just as aware of how much could go wrong. I'll come back, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. I promise you, Nadia, I will come back. They stood like that for a long moment, his hands cradling her face, her hands gripping his forearms, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Then Leo cleared his throat awkwardly and announced he needed coffee, disappearing into the kitchen with pointed deliberateness. Dante led Nadia to the couch, pulled her down beside him, kept her hand clasped in his. Tell me about Juliana, she said quietly. Not just what happened to her, but who she was. What she loved, what made her laugh. I want to know the person you're doing this for. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. This was clearly painful territory, the wound that had never healed. But then he started talking, his voice low and textured with grief that 5 years hadn't dulled. Juliana was light, he said. That's the only way I can describe her. She lit up every room she entered, made everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the world. She wanted to be an artist, spend hours painting these incredible abstract pieces that somehow captured emotion in color and shape. Our mother couldn't understand it, kept asking when she'd get a real job, but I knew Juliana was brilliant. What was she like as a sister? Nadia asked. Dante's smile was sad and fond at once. Stubborn, fearless. She'd argue with me about everything, refused to accept that I knew better just because I was older. When I joined the family business, she was the only one who challenged me about the violence, about the choices I was making. She believed people were fundamentally good, that systems could be fixed from the inside. I thought she was naive. But she wasn't, Nadia said softly. No, she was hopeful. There's a difference. Dante's thumb stroked across Nadia's knuckles absently. When she died, when I read her note about feeling violated and exposed and hunted, I realized she'd been right about the system being broken. But she'd been wrong about it being fixable from the inside. Some things are too corrupted, too invested in protecting predators. They have to be torn down completely. Is that what you're doing? Nadia asked. Tearing down the systems that failed her? I'm making sure no other family gets the call I got. Dante's voice went hard. No other brother has to identify his sister's body, read her suicide note, and know that she died because people who were supposed to protect her chose profit over safety instead. That's what I'm doing. That's what this has always been about. Nadia's heart ached for him, for the weight he'd been carrying alone for 5 years, for the way grief had transformed into purpose but never truly healed. She shifted closer, wrapped her arms around him, and felt him tense before slowly relaxing into her embrace. You're not alone anymore, she said against his chest. You have me. And I know I'm not Juliana. I can't replace what you lost, but I'm here. I see what you're doing, why it matters. You're not alone. Dante's arms came around her, crushing her against him with desperate intensity. His face pressed into her hair, and she felt him shudder, felt the carefully maintained control finally cracking. He didn't cry exactly, but she felt the grief move through him, years of locked-away emotion finally finding release in the safety of her arms. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the afternoon light faded outside the windows. Nadia had never felt closer to another person, never felt so utterly trusted with someone's pain. This wasn't protector and victim anymore. This was two people who'd been wounded by the same kind of evil, finding unexpected solace in each other. When Dante finally pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed but clearer than she'd seen them. Thank you, he said quietly, for listening, for understanding, for not treating her memory like it's too painful to touch. She was important, Nadia replied. She changed your life, gave you purpose. Of course her memory matters. The look Dante gave her was so intense it stole her breath. You matter too, he said. You've become just as important, Nadia. Maybe more, because you're here and real and choosing to stand with me despite the danger. I need you to know that. Heat flooded through Nadia at the raw honesty in his voice. She knew they'd been building towards something since that first night, knew the attraction between them was mutual and powerful. But this was more than attraction. This was connection, recognition, the sense of having found someone who understood you on a fundamental level. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marco assembled the infiltration team, 6 men who all had military or law enforcement backgrounds and were completely loyal to Dante. Leo continued cracking buyer accounts and mapping out the hotel security system. Maria coordinated with other survivor advocates, preparing to receive and support the women whose images were being sold. And Nadia watched Dante prepare for a confrontation that could end his life, feeling increasingly desperate and terrified and helpless. She'd gone from victim to partner in less than a week, and now she was being asked to step back, to wait at home while the man she stopped that thought before it could fully form. She wasn't ready to name what she felt, wasn't ready to examine how completely Dante Marcelli had become central to her world in such a short time. The night before the auction, the penthouse was tense with anticipation and unspoken fear. Marco had left after final strategy review. Leo was at his own apartment, getting rest before the big day. It was just Nadia and Dante, alone in the vast space, both pretending to review files while actually just stealing glances at each other. You should sleep, Dante said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be stressful, waiting here while we're at the auction. Nadia shook her head. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I imagine everything that could go wrong tomorrow night. I see you walking into that auction and not coming back out. Dante set down the tablet he'd been pretending to read, his full attention shifting to her. I've told you I'll be careful, that I have a team and a plan and contingencies for every scenario we can think of. I know. Nadia's voice was barely a whisper. But knowing something rationally doesn't stop me from being terrified of losing you. The admission hung between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Dante stood from his chair, crossed to where she sat on the couch, and crouched in front of her so their eyes were level. His hands came to rest on her knees, warm through the fabric of the borrowed clothes she wore. I'm terrified too, he said quietly. Not of the auction or Zhao or the danger to me. I'm terrified that something will happen to you, that they'll somehow breach my security and get to you while I'm gone. I'm terrified that I've let you become so important to me that the thought of you being hurt makes me want to burn the world down. You can't think like that tomorrow, Nadia said. You have to be focused, strategic, not emotional. You taught me that. I know. His hand slid up to frame her face, thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. But tonight, with you, I don't want to be strategic. I don't want to be the calculated leader who weighs risk and benefit. I just want to be a man who's falling for a woman who terrifies and amazes him in equal measure. Nadia's breath caught. Falling, she repeated. Fallen, Dante corrected, his voice rough. Past tense. I tried to maintain distance, tried to be professional and protective, and nothing more. But Nadia, you made that impossible from the moment you chose to fight instead of hiding. From the moment you walked back into danger to help women you'd never met. From the moment you held me while I grieved my sister and didn't flinch from my pain. She should say something, should respond to this confession with one of her own. But words felt inadequate for what was building between them. This desperate need that had been compressed by days of fear and danger and enforced proximity. So instead of speaking, Nadia closed the small distance between them and kissed him. Dante made a sound low in his throat, surprise and relief and hunger all mixed together. His hands tightened on her face, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and Nadia felt 5 days of tension finally break. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and devastating intensity, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I said we should wait until you were safe, he murmured, until the threat was over and you weren't dependent on my protection. I know what you said, Nadia replied, but I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to spend tonight thinking about all the things that could go wrong tomorrow. I want to spend it with you, Dante. All of it. All of you. She felt him tense, felt the war between want and restraint playing out in his body. Are you sure, he asked. Because once we cross this line, Nadia, I won't want to go back. You'll be mine, and I'm not good at sharing what's mine. The possessiveness should have bothered her, should have triggered every feminist instinct about being owned or claimed. Instead, it sent heat flooding through her body, made her pulse race with anticipation. Yes, she said. I'm sure. I want this. I want you. Dante stood in one smooth motion, pulling her up with him. His eyes were dark with desire, but also something softer, something that looked like reverence. Then let me do this properly, he said. Let me show you how you deserve to be touched. He lifted her easily, and Nadia wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her down the hall. Not to the guest room where she'd been sleeping, but to his own bedroom, the space she'd never entered. It was simpler than she'd expected, more personal. Dark colors, comfortable furniture, windows that looked out over the city lights. Dante laid her on the bed with unexpected gentleness, then stood back, giving her space and time. Last chance to change your mind, he said. No pressure, no expectations. We can stop right now and nothing changes between us. But Nadia didn't want to stop. She'd spent a week being victimized, violated, treated like she was something to be exploited or protected. She wanted to choose this, wanted to claim her own desire, wanted to be touched with tenderness instead of clinical detachment. And she wanted it to be Dante, this complicated, dangerous man who'd shown her nothing but respect despite the power he held over her situation. I'm not changing my mind, she said, reaching for him. Dante came to her then, settling beside her on the bed, his weight and warmth a solid presence. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and deep. His hands moved over her with careful intent, learning the shape of her, the places that made her gasp or arch into his touch. Every movement asked permission, checked in, made sure she was present and willing. Nadia had expected urgency, the kind of desperate coupling that came from days of compressed tension. Instead, Dante took his time, removing her clothes piece by piece, trailing kisses across newly exposed skin. He murmured things in Italian she didn't understand but felt in her bones, words that sounded like worship and possession and need. When she reached for his shirt, tried to accelerate the pace, he caught her hands. Slowly, he said, let me do this slowly. Let me show you how you should be touched. With care. With reverence. Like you're precious, because you are. His words undid something inside her, some last piece of control or defense. She let him set the pace, let him explore her with hands and mouth and whispered praise. He seemed fascinated by every inch of her, commenting on her strength, her beauty, the way her body responded to his touch. When he finally moved over her, braced on his arms, his eyes locked with hers. "This is your choice," he said. "Tell me what you want, Nadia." "You," she breathed. "I want you. All of you. Please." Dante kissed her as he joined their bodies, swallowing her gasp, moving with careful restraint until she adjusted to him. Then it was heat and pressure and the perfect friction of skin on skin, his body claiming hers while his eyes never left her face, watching every reaction, making sure she was with him at every moment. It was intense and overwhelming and exactly what Nadia needed. Not clinical or distant or exploitative, but connected and present and chosen. She felt safe and desired and powerful all at once. Felt like she was reclaiming something that had been stolen from her. Her body, her choice, her pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the dark, Dante's arm around her waist, her head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, and she felt more content than she had in years. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured into her hair. "Not in the guest room. Here, with me. Let me hold you until morning." Nadia pressed closer, felt his arms tighten around her. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "I'm right here." They drifted in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. Then Dante spoke again, his voice quiet and serious in the darkness. "After tomorrow, after the auction, I want you to stay. Not because you're in danger or need protection. Because I want you in my life, Nadia. In my home. In my bed. I want this, us, to be real and lasting." Nadia's heart squeezed at the vulnerability in his confession. "I want that too," she said. "Whatever this is between us, it's not just circumstance or adrenaline. It's real, and I want to see where it goes." She felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath, felt relief move through him. "Good," he said. "That's good. Because I meant what I said earlier. You're mine now, Nadia. And I protect what's mine." Nadia smiled against his chest, felt the possessive words settle around her like a promise instead of a threat. "Yours," she agreed. "And you're mine too, Dante Marcelli. Don't forget that tomorrow when you're being strategic and calculated, you have someone waiting for you to come home. I won't forget." His hand stroked through her hair, gentle and soothing. "I promise I'll come back to you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, both refusing to think about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Morning came too early, pale winter light filtering through the windows. Nadia woke to Dante already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that was soft and unguarded. "Good morning," he said, voice rough from sleep, and leaned down to kiss her thoroughly. The morning that followed was sweet and domestic in ways that felt significant. They showered together, made breakfast in the kitchen while stealing kisses, moved around each other with the comfortable familiarity of people who'd been together far longer than a week. Nadia wore one of Dante's shirts and nothing else, and the way his eyes darkened every time he looked at her made heat pool low in her belly. But their stolen morning of happiness shattered when Marco arrived with grim news. "Dr. Chun is dead," he said without preamble. "Found in his apartment this morning. Apparent suicide, single gunshot to the head. But the scene was staged. This was an execution." Nadia felt the blood drain from her face. "Zhao," she whispered. "Definitely Zhao." Marco's expression was hard. Chun was a liability after Nadia's infiltration. Zhao couldn't risk him being arrested and cutting a deal. So he eliminated the problem. "Which means Zhao knows we're coming tonight," Dante said, his voice cold. "He knows there's a threat to the auction, and he's tying up loose ends. The operation is going to be even more dangerous than we planned." "Should we postpone?" Nadia asked, fear making her voice tight. "No." Dante shook his head. "If we postpone, Zhao moves the auction somewhere we can't track. Those 63 women's images get sold, and we lose our chance to identify the buyers. We go tonight as planned. We just need to be more careful." But the news of Dr. Chen's death hung over the rest of the day like a shadow. This was real, Nadia realized with crystalline clarity. People died in this world Dante operated in. He'd told her that, had been honest about the danger, but seeing the consequence of it made it visceral and terrifying. As evening approached and Dante prepared for the auction, Nadia felt her anxiety building to unbearable levels. He was checking weapons, reviewing the hotel layout one final time, going through contingency plans with Marco. All of it professional and practiced. But underneath she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. When Marco stepped out to move the vehicles into position, Dante pulled Nadia into his arms. "Promise me you'll stay here," he said. "Marco's leaving 2 men for security, but you don't open this door for anyone except me. You understand?" "I understand." Nadia pressed closer, memorizing the feel of him against her. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back." Dante cupped her face, kissed her with desperate intensity. "I promise. And when I get back, we're going to talk about what comes next. About you staying here permanently. About building something real together. About a future that doesn't involve hiding or running or fear." Tears burned in Nadia's eyes. "I want that. I want all of that with you. Then I'll make sure it happens." One more kiss, deep and claiming, and then Dante stepped back. "I love you," he said, the words rough and unexpected. "I know it's too soon and too intense and probably not the right time, but I need you to know. In case something goes wrong tonight, I need you to know you changed everything for me, Nadia Reeves." "I love you too," she said, the truth of it surprising her even as she spoke. "Be safe, Dante. Come back to me." He left then, and Nadia stood at the windows watching the city lights spread out below, waiting for the longest night of her life to begin. The Columbia Hotel rose 40 stories into the Portland skyline, all steel and glass, and the kind of understated luxury that catered to people who didn't need to announce their wealth. Tonight, the top-floor ballroom was hosting what appeared to be a private art auction, invitation only, with security tight enough to keep out anyone who wasn't on the carefully curated guest list. Except Dante Marcelli was on that list, registered under a false name, with credentials that would hold up to scrutiny, because Leo had made sure of it. He'd entered the hotel an hour ago, dressed in an expensive suit, playing the role of wealthy collector interested in acquiring unique pieces. Around him, other men in similar attire moved through the space, drinks in hand, discussing the upcoming auction in tones that were casual despite the illegal nature of what they were about to purchase. Nadia watched it all unfold on the laptop screen in Dante's penthouse, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. Leo had hacked the hotel's security system, giving them access to multiple camera feeds. She could see Dante moving through the crowd, could see Marco positioned near the server room, could see the other team members scattered strategically throughout the building. But she couldn't hear what was being said, couldn't know if Dante was safe, couldn't do anything but watch and wait, and try not to imagine every possible way this could go catastrophically wrong. Marco's man, stationed by the door, glanced at her with sympathy. "He'll be fine, miss. Mr. Marcelli has done this kind of thing dozens of times. He knows what he's doing." Nadia nodded, but couldn't speak past the fear lodged in her throat. Dante had kissed her goodbye 3 hours ago, had told her he loved her, had promised to come back. Now all she could do was watch him walk into danger and trust that he was as skilled as everyone claimed. On screen, the auction was beginning. The lights dimmed in the ballroom, and a man stepped onto the small stage that had been set up. Even through the grainy security footage, Nadia could see he was charismatic, well-dressed, the kind of person who commanded attention without effort. Vincent Zhao, the man behind the entire trafficking network, the person who'd coordinated the exploitation of hundreds of women, who'd profited millions from their violation. He looked so normal, so professional, like any other businessman presenting at any other event. The disconnect between his appearance and his actions made Nadia feel sick. "Welcome, gentlemen." Zhao's voice came through the audio feed that Leo had tapped into. "Thank you for joining us this evening for what promises to be an exceptional collection. As always, all transactions are completely anonymous and secure. Payment processed through our usual channels, delivery of digital files within 24 hours of sale completion." He spoke about exploitation like it was fine art, his tone smooth and practiced. The audience listened attentively, some taking notes, all of them there to purchase women's most vulnerable moments without a shred of conscience. "Our first offering tonight," Zhao continued, pulling up an image on the large screen behind him. 26-year-old professional, acquired during routine gynecological examination, high-quality imaging, never previously circulated. Bidding starts at 40,000. Nadia watched the screen in horror as men raised numbered paddles, competing to own this woman's violation. The bidding moved quickly, efficiently, like any other auction, except the commodity being sold was a human being's dignity and privacy. This went on for nearly an hour. Woman after woman, their images displayed and sold, their lives reduced to demographic details and quality assessments. Nadia recognized some of them from Dr. Chen's files, faces she'd seen in those terrible folders, women who had no idea this was happening. Then Zhao pulled up a new image, and Nadia's entire world contracted to that screen. It was her own face, her own body, captured in clinical detail during her physical exam 6 months ago. The violation hit her all over again, seeing herself displayed for a room full of predators, hearing Zhao describe her like she was merchandise. 28-year-old medical professional, Middle Eastern descent, virgin collection never before available, exceptional quality imaging from trusted source. This is a premium offering, gentlemen. Bidding starts at 50,000. On the security feed, Nadia saw Dante go rigid, saw his hands clench into fists. She could imagine the rage coursing through him, watching the woman he loved being violated in front of dozens of men who saw her as nothing more than a purchase. The bidding started. Numbers climbed rapidly as men competed for her images. 60,000. 75. 90. The amounts were incomprehensible. The casual way they treated her body as property, making rage and humiliation burn through Nadia in equal measure. Then she saw Dante raise his paddle. 100,000, he said, his voice cold and controlled. The room went quiet for a moment, other bidders reassessing. Then someone else countered. 125. Dante didn't hesitate. 200,000. That drew attention. Other buyers turned to look at him, clearly wondering who would pay so much for images that, while high quality, weren't dramatically different from other offerings. But Dante met their stares with cold indifference, his message clear. These photos were his, and he'd outbid anyone who challenged him. Nadia understood what he was doing. If he won the bid, those images would never reach a real predator, would be destroyed the moment he got his hands on them. He was using his wealth to protect her even here, even in the middle of an operation that could cost him his life. Going once, Zhao said, looking around the room. Going twice. Sold, to bidder 73 for $200,000. Dante gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, and Nadia felt tears burning in her eyes. He'd done it. Her images were safe. But watching him spend that kind of money to protect her privacy, seeing the tension in his shoulders, knowing he was barely holding himself together, made her chest ache with love and fear in equal measure. The auction continued, but Nadia could see Dante was struggling now. His cover required him to seem interested in the remaining offerings, but she could see the rage simmering beneath his professional mask. Every woman whose images were sold was another reminder of Juliana, another life violated for profit, another piece of evidence that the system he'd spent 5 years trying to dismantle was still thriving. Then everything went wrong. A man across the room stood up, his eyes locked on Dante. "I know you," he said loudly. "You're Marcelli. Dante Marcelli. What the hell are you doing here?" The room erupted. Security guards appeared from multiple directions. Zhao's expression went from smooth host to cold calculation in an instant. Someone had recognized Dante from previous territory conflicts, had blown his cover in front of the entire auction. Nadia watched in horror as Dante moved, smooth and fast, drawing a weapon from beneath his jacket. Marco and the rest of the team revealed themselves simultaneously, surrounding the buyers and security in a coordinated display of force. "Everyone stay calm," Dante commanded, his voice carrying authority that made even armed security guards hesitate. "This auction is over. My team is currently downloading every file from your servers, identifying every buyer, documenting every transaction. You can cooperate and walk away, or you can resist and face consequences you really don't want." But Vincent Zhao was already moving, backing toward a side door while his security engaged Dante's team. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks that echoed through the ballroom. Buyers scattered, some trying to flee, others caught in the crossfire. Nadia couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. This was supposed to be strategic, controlled. Instead, it had devolved into chaos and violence, and Dante was in the middle of it. exchanging fire with security while trying to track Zhao's escape. Marco's voice came through the comms. Dante, Zhao's heading for the roof access. I've got the situation here. Go after him. Nadia watched Dante sprint after Zhao, watched him disappear from the ballroom cameras. For agonizing minutes, she had no visual, no way of knowing what was happening. She could hear the sounds of fighting through the audio feed, could hear Marco coordinating with the team, could hear Leo confirming he'd successfully downloaded and corrupted all the auction files. But she couldn't see Dante, couldn't know if he was alive or hurt or dying somewhere beyond the camera's reach. The guard stationed at the door was focused on his phone, receiving updates from the team. Nadia made a decision that was probably reckless, definitely against Dante's explicit orders, but impossible to ignore. She grabbed her jacket, found the backup weapon the guard had set on the side table, and headed for the door. "Miss, you can't leave," the guard protested. "Mr. Marcelli said." "Mr. Marcelli is in trouble," Nadia interrupted. "I heard it on the comms. Either you can come with me or stay here, but I'm going to that hotel." She didn't wait for his response, just ran for the elevator. The guard cursed, but followed, probably more afraid of what Dante would do if something happened to her than willing to let her go alone. They took Dante's SUV from the garage, the guard driving while Nadia monitored the comms, trying to piece together what was happening. Leo's voice crackled through. "Dante's on the roof pursuing Zhao. Marco, can you provide backup?" "I'm pinned down here by security," Marco responded. "Someone needs to get to that roof now." The drive to the hotel felt endless, every second stretching while Nadia imagined terrible scenarios. When they finally arrived, chaos reigned. Police vehicles were pulling up, but these were the officers on Dante's payroll, there to secure the scene and arrest the buyers. Nadia pushed through the crowd, showed identification the guard provided that got her past the perimeter, and found her way to the stairwell that led to the roof. The climb was brutal, 40 flights at a sprint, her lungs burning and legs screaming. But she couldn't stop, couldn't slow down, couldn't bear the thought of reaching that roof and finding Dante dead because she'd been too slow. She burst through the roof access door and into cold night air. Portland spread out below, city lights glittering. But Nadia's focus was entirely on the two men at the edge of the roof. Dante had Vincent Zhao pinned against the waist-high barrier, his forearm across the other man's throat. Zhao's face was bloody, his expensive suit torn, but his expression showed defiance rather than fear. "You think this ends anything?" Zhao choked out. "You think destroying one auction, arresting a few buyers, makes a difference? There are dozens of networks like mine, hundreds of operations. You can't stop this, Marcelli. The demand is too high, the profit too good. Someone else will just replace me." "I know," Dante said, and his voice was cold as death. "But they'll know what happens to people who exploit vulnerable women. They'll know there's a cost, a consequence they can't buy or threaten their way out of. You're going to be that example, Zhao." Nadia saw his grip tighten, saw the calculation in his eyes. He was going to do it, was going to kill Vincent Zhao right here, right now, and she understood why. For Juliana. For the 300 women whose lives had been violated. For her. Dante was going to cross a line he couldn't uncross, and she knew with terrible certainty that it would destroy something essential in him. "Dante," she called out, her voice cutting through the wind. He turned, shock and horror crossing his features as he saw her standing there. "Nadia, what are you doing here? I told you to stay at the penthouse, to stay safe." "I couldn't," she said, walking toward them slowly, the guard's weapon in her shaking hands though she had no intention of using it. "I couldn't sit there wondering if you were alive, waiting for news that might never come. I needed to be here." She reached them, stood close enough to see Dante's face clearly. His expression was torn between rage at Zhao and fear for her, between the need for revenge and the desire to protect her from witnessing what came next. "You shouldn't see this," he said roughly. "You shouldn't be here for this part, Nadia. Go back downstairs. Please." "No." Nadia held his gaze, let him see everything she felt. "I'm not leaving you. Not now, not ever. But Dante, I need you to hear me. I need you to choose." "Choose what?" he demanded, his voice raw with grief and fury. "Choose between justice for my sister and protecting your sensibilities? Choose between eliminating a monster and being the man you think you need me to be? Choose between revenge and a future," Nadia said quietly. "Choose between killing him and living with that choice forever, or letting him face legal consequences and being able to look at yourself in the mirror tomorrow. Choose between Juliana's memory and our life together. Dante's jaw clenched, muscle ticking with tension. He killed my sister, he said. Maybe not directly, but his network destroyed her. She was 20 years old, Nadia. 20 years old, and so traumatized by what these people did to her that she took her own life. Doesn't that deserve retribution? Yes, Nadia said, and meant it. It does. What he's done is unforgivable. But Dante, killing him doesn't bring her back. It doesn't undo the harm. It just adds more violence to a world that already has too much. She stepped closer, close enough to touch him. I'm not asking you to forgive him or show him mercy he doesn't deserve. I'm asking you to choose me. To choose us. To choose a future where you're not haunted by this moment. Where you don't wake up every morning knowing you became the kind of person Juliana would have been afraid of. Dante's eyes closed briefly, and she saw the war playing out across his features. Everything in him wanted this revenge, had wanted it for 5 years. But she was asking him to step back, to choose differently, to value their future more than his past. Please, she whispered. Choose me. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Dante's grip on Zhao loosened. He stepped back, his expression anguished but resolute. You're right, he said roughly. You're right, and I hate that you're right, but I choose you. I choose us. Relief flooded through Nadia so intensely she felt dizzy. Dante had chosen her, had chosen their future, had chosen to be someone she could build a life with rather than someone consumed by vengeance. But Vincent Zhao, seeing his opportunity, moved with desperate speed. He pulled a weapon Nadia hadn't seen, brought it up toward Dante's chest. Time seemed to slow as Nadia saw what was happening, as she realized Dante had been too focused on her to watch for an attack. Dante's reflexes were faster. He moved on pure instinct, his own weapon coming up, firing twice before Zhao could pull the trigger. The sounds were deafening in the open air, and Vincent Zhao stumbled backward, his expression shocked, before falling. Nadia ran to Dante, needed to touch him, to confirm he was alive and whole. He caught her against his chest, one arm crushing her close while he kept his weapon trained on Zhao with the other. But it was unnecessary. Vincent Zhao was dead, his eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. The architect of so much suffering finally stopped. I didn't want to, Dante said, his voice broken. I'd chosen you. Chosen to let him face justice. But he didn't give me a choice. He was going to kill me, and I had to. I know, Nadia said fiercely. I saw it, Dante. He attacked you. This wasn't murder, it was self-defense. You chose me, chose our future, and he forced your hand. This isn't on you. The rooftop door burst open and Marco appeared with 2 officers, weapons drawn until they saw the scene. The officers, clearly on Dante's payroll, assessed the situation quickly. Self-defense, one of them said. Multiple witnesses will confirm Zhao fired first. This is clean, Mr. Marcelli. Within minutes, the roof was flooded with people. Law enforcement securing the scene, Dante's team providing statements, medical personnel confirming what everyone already knew. Vincent Zhao was dead, his network was destroyed, and the auction that would have victimized 63 women had been stopped. Maria arrived as they were giving statements, her expression fierce and proud. The files are corrupted beyond recovery, she reported. Leo made sure every image, every transaction record, every piece of evidence of the women's exploitation is gone. They're finally free. Nadia felt tears burning in her eyes, for herself and for all those women who'd never know how close they'd come to being sold, who were safe now because of what Dante and his team had done. As they finally left the hotel hours later, dawn was breaking over Portland. Nadia held Dante's hand tightly, both of them exhausted and traumatized but alive. The buyer list had been secured, law enforcement was processing arrests, and the network that had operated for years was finally broken. In the SUV on the way back to the penthouse, Dante pulled Nadia against his side. I thought I'd lost you when I saw you on that roof, he said quietly. Thought you'd seen too much, witnessed the violence I'm capable of, and would run. Nadia looked up at him, saw the fear and vulnerability in his dark eyes. I see all of you, she said. The violence and the protection, the darkness and the care, the grief and the love. I choose all of it, Dante. I choose you completely. He kissed her then, desperate and relieved and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, the the sun was rising over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning, a future they'd fought for and earned. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The weeks following the auction passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and slow, careful healing. The FBI task force that Dante had provided evidence to moved swiftly, arresting buyers from the auction, shutting down the 20 compromised medical practices, and dismantling what remained of Vincent Zhao's network. The story broke nationally, medical exploitation rings exposed, and survivors began coming forward to share their experiences and seek justice. Nadia found herself at the center of it all, though her identity was protected in official reports. She testified in closed hearings, her account of Dr. Chen's operation and the auction providing crucial context for prosecutors. It was exhausting and often triggering, forcing her to relive her violation repeatedly. But every time she wavered, she thought about the other women, the ones who'd never know they'd been exploited, and she pushed through. Maria's foundation became the primary support organization for survivors, providing counseling, legal assistance, and medical care. Nadia found herself drawn to the work, using her medical knowledge to help other women navigate the trauma of having their bodies documented and sold without consent. It gave her purpose, transformed her violation into something meaningful. And through it all, Dante was there, not hovering or controlling, but present and supportive, understanding when she needed space to process and when she needed to be held. They navigated the aftermath of the auction together, both dealing with their own trauma while building something new between them. 2 weeks after the rooftop confrontation, Nadia finally returned to Dante's penthouse after a long day at the foundation. She was exhausted, emotionally drained from counseling sessions with survivors. But there was also satisfaction in the work. She was making a difference, helping women reclaim their dignity and power. Dante was in the kitchen when she arrived, cooking something that smelled incredible. He'd taken to preparing elaborate dinners, finding comfort in the ritual of feeding her, of providing care in tangible ways. It was sweet and domestic and so different from the dangerous man who'd infiltrated an illegal auction that sometimes Nadia had to remind herself they were the same person. "How was your day?" he asked, pulling her into his arms for a long kiss. "Hard," she admitted, pressing her face against his chest. "We had 3 new intakes today. Women from other medical practices in Zhao's network. Their stories are heartbreaking, Dante. The violation, the fear, the way it changes how they see their own bodies." His arms tightened around her. "You're helping them. You're giving them what Juliana never got, what you almost didn't get. That matters, Nadia. More than you know." They ate dinner together, talking about their days, about the ongoing legal proceedings, about the future. Dante had been surprisingly open about his past, sharing details about his family business, the legitimate operations, and the shadow work, giving Nadia complete transparency about the world she was choosing to be part of. "I've been thinking," Dante said as they cleaned up after dinner, "about what comes next. For us." Nadia looked up from loading the dishwasher, caught by the serious tone in his voice. "What do you mean?" "This started because you needed protection," he said carefully. "Because you were in danger and I had resources to keep you safe. But the danger is over now, Nadia. Zhao's network is destroyed, the buyers are being prosecuted, and you're not a target anymore. Which means you don't have to stay here. If you want your own place, want space to figure out what you want without the pressure of living with me, I understand." Nadia's heart clenched at the careful way he was offering her an exit, the respect he was showing for her autonomy, even though she could see in his eyes that losing her would devastate him. "I don't want my own place," she said quietly. "I want to be here, with you. Not because I need protection, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you." Relief flooded Dante's expression, raw and unguarded. "You're sure?" "Because Nadia, if you stay, I'm going to want everything. I'm going to want you here permanently. Want you as my partner in every sense. Want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." "Then it's good that I want the same things," she replied, moving into his arms. "I've thought about this, Dante, about what it means to be with you, to be part of your world. I know it's not conventional or safe or what I imagine for myself, but it's real and it's ours, and I don't want to be anywhere else." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Nadia felt the last pieces of uncertainty fall away. This was her choice, freely made, without coercion or desperation. She was choosing Dante Marcelli, choosing this life, choosing a future that would be complicated and sometimes dangerous, but never boring or meaningless. A month after the auction, the legal proceedings had progressed enough that Maria organized a gathering at the foundation. Survivors who felt comfortable enough to meet, plus the team who'd helped take down the network. It was meant to be celebratory, a recognition of how far they'd all come, but there was also solemnity to it. Healing wasn't linear, and many of the women there were still struggling with the aftermath of exploitation. Nadia stood with Maria, watching the room fill with women of all ages and backgrounds, united by shared trauma and the beginning stages of recovery. She recognized some of them from support group sessions, others she was meeting for the first time. Each had their own story, their own path to this moment. "Thank you for being here," Maria said, addressing the group. "For trusting us, for trusting each other, for having the courage to reclaim your stories. What happened to you was violation and exploitation. But you're not defined by what was done to you. You're defined by how you survived, how you fought back, how you're building new lives despite the trauma." She spoke about the network being dismantled, about the buyers facing prosecution, about the evidence being destroyed so no woman would ever have to worry about those images surfacing. There was applause, tears, and the kind of cathartic release that came from knowing justice had been served. Then Maria turned to Nadia. "I want to recognize someone special." Nadia Reeves risked everything to expose Dr. Chin's operation. She could have stayed silent, could have protected herself. Instead, she chose to fight, and because of her courage, 63 women were spared from exploitation. Because of her, this entire network was brought down. The room erupted in applause, and Nadia felt overwhelmed by the attention, by the gratitude in these women's eyes. She hadn't done it for recognition, had barely thought about consequences when she'd copied those files. She'd just known it was wrong and needed to be stopped. After the formal program ended, women approached Nadia individually, sharing their stories, thanking her for her bravery. One woman, younger than Nadia by several years, gripped her hands tightly. "I was scheduled for an appointment with Dr. Chun the week after the auction was stopped," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea. I would have trusted him completely. You saved me from that violation. Thank you." Nadia hugged her, both of them crying, understanding in a visceral way what had been at stake. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real lives, real women, real trauma that had been prevented because she'd chosen to act instead of hiding. Dante found her later, standing by the windows, processing everything. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his hands settling on her lower back. "Yeah," she said, just overwhelmed. Hearing their stories, knowing how close some of them came to being victimized, it makes everything we went through feel worth it. "It was worth it," Dante confirmed. "You did something incredible, Nadia. You should be proud." She turned to face him fully. "We did it together. You and your team, Maria and her foundation. All of us working toward the same goal. That's what made the difference." Dante smiled, soft and genuine. "Always so generous with credit. But we both know you were the catalyst. The one who chose courage when staying silent would have been easier." They stayed at the foundation for hours. Dante integrated seamlessly into the survivor community, his presence protective without being overbearing. Nadia watched him interact with the women there, saw how gentle he was with their trauma, how carefully he respected their boundaries. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who channeled grief into protection, who used his power to defend rather than dominate. 3 months after the auction, Nadia woke to spring sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and Dante already awake beside her. He did that sometimes, just watched her sleep with an expression that was soft and unguarded. It should have been creepy, but instead it made her feel cherished, seen, loved in ways she'd never experienced before. "Good morning," she murmured, stretching. "Good morning, beautiful." He leaned down to kiss her, slow and thorough. "I have something for you." Nadia sat up, curious. "It's not my birthday. It's not an anniversary. What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Just something I want you to have." Dante reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Nadia's heart stuttered. That looked like a jewelry box. That looked specifically like a ring box. Her breath caught as Dante opened it to reveal a stunning engagement ring, simple but elegant, with a single diamond that caught the morning light. I know we've only been together for a few months, Dante said. I know most people would say this is too fast, too intense, that we should wait longer. But Nadia, I've spent 5 years alone, driven by grief and vengeance, not believing I'd ever find someone who understood the darkness I carry. And then you walked into my life, fierce and brave and determined to fight for what's right despite the cost. You changed everything. He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. You made me want a future beyond revenge. Made me believe I could be more than the sum of my worst choices. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that choosing me wasn't a mistake. Tears were streaming down Nadia's face now, overwhelming emotion making it hard to breathe. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you build this complicated, imperfect, beautiful life with me? Nadia didn't hesitate. Yes, she said through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. I love you, Dante. I want all of it, the complications and the beauty and everything in between. He slid the ring onto her finger, perfect fit, and pulled her into his arms. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the significance of the moment settled around them. They'd found each other in trauma and violence, but they were building something beautiful from that foundation. The engagement was short by conventional standards, just 3 months, but neither of them saw the point in waiting. They'd already faced death together, already knew what they wanted. The wedding was small, held at Dante's family estate in the countryside outside Portland. Just immediate family and the team who'd helped bring down the network. Rosa Marcelli, Dante's mother, embraced Nadia with tears in her eyes. You brought my son back to life, she said in accented English. After Juliana, I thought I'd lost him to anger forever. But you showed him how to live again. Thank you, daughter. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Maria stood as Nadia's maid of honor, Marco as Dante's best man. When they exchanged vows, both of them wrote their own, words that were specific and personal and achingly honest. I promise to choose you every day, Nadia said, her voice steady despite her tears. To see all of you, the light and the darkness, and love every part. I promise to fight beside you, to protect what we're building, and to remind you that you're more than your worst moments. I choose you, Dante Marcelli, completely and without reservation. Dante's voice was rough with emotion when he spoke his vows. I promise to protect you without controlling you, to respect your strength while offering my support. I promise to honor Juliana's memory by building a life she would have been proud of. And I promise to love you fiercely, faithfully, for all the days I have left. You saved me, Nadia. Now let me spend the rest of my life earning that salvation. There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering as they kissed, as they were pronounced husband and wife, as they walked back down the aisle together into their new life. The reception was joyful, full of laughter and dancing and the kind of happiness that felt earned rather than given. Nadia danced with Dante, with Marco, with Leo, with her father who'd flown in from across the country. She'd worried about introducing her traditional Iranian parents to Dante's world, but they'd surprised her with their acceptance, seeing how happy she was and choosing to embrace the man who'd brought that happiness. As the evening wound down, Dante pulled Nadia away from the celebration, led her to a quiet corner of the garden. The spring air was warm, stars visible above them despite the outdoor lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together looking out at the estate. Happy, he murmured against her hair. So happy, she confirmed. This is everything I never knew I wanted. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, visiting Dante's extended family and showing Nadia the country her husband's heritage came from. It was beautiful and romantic and exactly what they both needed after months of trauma and legal proceedings. They ate incredible food, explored ancient cities, made love in hotel rooms with open windows and Mediterranean breezes. But eventually, they returned to Portland, to real life, to the work they'd both committed to. The foundation was thriving, having expanded to serve survivors beyond just medical exploitation. Nadia had decided to continue her medical education, but with a new focus on trauma-informed care and advocacy for survivors of sexual violence. 6 months after the wedding, Nadia stood in the foundation's medical clinic, providing care to a young woman who'd recently escaped a trafficking situation. The woman was scared, traumatized, struggling to trust anyone in a medical setting after what had been done to her. But Nadia understood that fear intimately, knew how to move slowly, to ask permission, to restore a sense of control and dignity. "You're safe here," Nadia said gently as she completed the examination. "Everything I'm doing is with your consent, and we can stop at any time if you're uncomfortable. You're in charge of your own body and your own healing." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me as a person, not just another case." "Always," Nadia promised. "You're not what was done to you. You're a survivor, and we're going to help you build whatever life you want from here." After the appointment, Maria found Nadia in her office, updating patient records. "You're a natural at this," she said. "The survivors respond to you in ways they don't with other providers. It's because you understand, because you've been where they are." Nadia looked up from her computer. "I just remember what it felt like. The violation, the fear, the way trust became impossible. If I can make even one woman feel less alone in that, then everything I went through served a purpose." That night, Nadia came home to the penthouse that was now officially theirs, both names on the deed, both of their lives integrated completely. Dante was in the kitchen again, cooking, and the domestic normalcy of it still made her smile. This dangerous man who'd taken down trafficking networks was making pasta from scratch and humming along to music playing from his phone. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressed her face against his back. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." He turned in her embrace, pulled her close. "How was your day?" They talked over dinner, shared stories about their work, made plans for the weekend. It was ordinary and beautiful, and everything Nadia had never thought she'd have. A partner who understood her, meaningful work, a sense of purpose beyond just surviving. After dinner, they ended up on the couch, Nadia curled against Dante's side while they half-watched a movie. His hand rested on her stomach, casual and warm, and she felt content in a way that went bone deep. "I have something to tell you," she said eventually. Dante muted the television, gave her his full attention. "What is it?" Nadia took a breath, nervous despite knowing he'd be thrilled. "I'm pregnant. About 8 weeks. I found out this morning at the clinic." For a moment, Dante just stared at her, processing. Then his face transformed, joy and awe and love all mixing together. "You're serious? We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," Nadia confirmed, and then she was in his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. It was fast, maybe faster than they'd planned, but it felt right. They'd built something beautiful from trauma and violence, and now they were creating new life, new hope, new possibilities. Dante's hand splayed across her stomach, protective and reverent. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For this, for choosing me, for building this life with me. I never thought I'd have this. Family, happiness, a future worth living for. You gave me all of it, Nadia. You gave it to yourself," she corrected gently. "You chose to heal instead of staying broken. You chose to build instead of just destroying. I just reminded you that you were worth saving." They spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, about names and nurseries, and how their lives would change. About the family they were creating, the legacy they were building from the ashes of what had tried to destroy them. 18 months after the auction, Nadia stood in the Foundation's expanded facility, holding her 3-month-old daughter while greeting donors and supporters. Juliana Rose Marcelli, named for the aunt she'd never meet, but whose memory had shaped her parents' purpose. She had Dante's dark eyes and Nadia's nose, and she was perfect. Dante appeared at her side, fresh from a meeting about expanding the Foundation's services to other states. He took his daughter with the careful gentleness he'd developed over the past 3 months, cradling her against his chest while she made small cooing sounds. "How's our girl?" he asked. "Perfect as always." Nadia leaned against him, the 3 of them a unit, a family. Around them, the Foundation hummed with activity. Survivors receiving counseling, medical care, legal assistance. Former traffickers facing prosecution. Systems being reformed from the inside by people who understood the failures intimately. Maria approached with a folder. "The final numbers from the prosecution," she said. 43 buyers convicted and sentenced. 8 medical practices permanently closed. Vincent Zhao's entire financial network seized and distributed to victim compensation funds. "It's done, Nadia. It's finally done." Nadia felt something release in her chest, Some last piece of tension she'd been carrying since that night she'd discovered the photos in Dr. Chen's computer. It was over. Justice had been served, survivors were healing, and the network that had seemed invincible had been completely destroyed. That evening, back at the penthouse, Nadia stood at the windows holding Juliana while Dante prepared dinner. The city spread out below, lit up against the darkness. Millions of people living their lives with no idea what battles had been fought to protect them. Do you think she'll understand someday? Nadia asked quietly. What we did, why we did it. Do you think she'll be proud or horrified? Dante came to stand beside her, his arm around her waist. I think she'll understand that sometimes good people have to make hard choices. That justice isn't always neat or legal or comfortable. That her parents fought to protect vulnerable people, and that fight came with costs, but also with meaning. He kissed the top of their daughter's head gently. And I think Juliana, my sister, would be proud. Would love that we named our daughter after her. That her memory created something beautiful instead of just pain. We turned tragedy into purpose, violence into protection. That's what I want our daughter to know. Nadia looked at her family, at the life they'd built from impossibility. She'd gone from violated victim to survivor to advocate, had fallen in love with a dangerous man who'd shown her nothing but gentleness, had created a family from the ashes of trauma. It hadn't been easy, hadn't been safe, hadn't been anything she'd planned. But standing there in the warm light of their home, holding their daughter while the man she loved prepared dinner, Nadia knew with absolute certainty that every choice, every risk, every moment of fear had been worth it. They'd found each other in darkness and built something luminous together. And that, she thought as Dante called them to dinner and Juliana gurgled happily in her arms, was the best kind of healing. Not forgetting what happened, but transforming it into something meaningful. Not erasing the scars, but building beauty around them. They'd survived. They'd fought. They'd won. And now they were living, fully and completely, choosing joy despite knowing how fragile it could be. As they sat down to dinner together, a family forged in fire and violence, but sustained by love and purpose, Nadia caught Dante's eye across the table. He smiled at her, that soft private smile reserved only for her, and she felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was their happily ever after. Complicated, imperfect, hard-won. But theirs, completely and beautifully theirs. And that was everything.